My grandmother used to say, "A smiling face can hide a hungry heart." For a year, I looked at my son and his wife's smiles and thought it was love. Then came the night they smiled while giving me leftovers on a paper plate. That's when I saw the hunger in their eyes. The real truth, though, I found in black and white, in a notebook that called me by my new name, the Cash Cow. Hey there, great to have you with me today. I'm curious, where are you joining from? Write your city in the comments, and let's begin our story. Eat fast and leave. My daughter-in-law's words were louder than a gunshot in the quiet kitchen of their fancy house. She scraped the last of some boxed mac and cheese onto a paper plate, the plastic fork scraping against the cardboard. My son Jamal, my only child, sat right there at the granite island, his face lit by the blue glow of his phone, acting like he couldn't hear the world falling apart around me. In that moment, watching the boy I raised refuse to even look at me, it felt like my heart had cracked right down the middle. But that was just the start of my education in cruelty. The real horror came 3 days later when I found her notebook, the one where they called me their cash cow. They had a whole plan written down, a step-by-step guide on how to take the home my family had owned for generations. They figured old Mama Lo wouldn't understand a thing, but they didn't know something about me. They didn't know that Mama Lo was about to teach them the most important lesson of their lives. Before we get into the thick of it, I just want to say thank you for stopping by Mama Lo's porch. Go on and hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Now let's get back to it. There's a certain kind of quiet that settles into a house after your children grow up and move on. It's a heavy quiet, filled with ghosts of sounds you miss. The thump of my late husband Michael's work boots on the porch, the squeal of a little Jamal chasing a ball down the hallway. For the most part, I'd made my peace with that silence. It was the sound of a life lived, of a job well done. But some days, child, some days it would press down on me, heavy as a wet wool blanket. It made the rooms feel bigger and my world feel smaller. So when Jamal's name flashed across my phone screen that Tuesday afternoon, my heart did a little leap of joy. It was a foolish little flutter, like a teenage girl getting a call from a boy she likes. He said Tiffany was making her special meatloaf and they wanted me to come over for dinner. To me, that invitation felt like winning the lottery. It was a lifeline thrown into my quiet week, a promise of noise and family and connection. Love can make you a fool, and a mother's love is the most foolish kind of all. I immediately went to the kitchen and got to work on my famous sweet potato pie. It's the one with the hint of orange zest and the flaky, all butter, crust. The pie Jamal used to beg for on his birthday Christmas, any day he could get it. I poured all my love and hope into that pie. I imagined us sitting around the table laughing, Jamal stealing an extra slice when he thought I wasn't looking. I was trying to bake my way back into his life. I put on my good church dress, the blue one with the little flowers, and drove the 45 minutes from my quiet country road in rural Georgia to their brand new subdivision. Pulling into their neighborhood was like entering another world. The houses were huge, identical beige boxes with perfect manicured lawns that looked like they'd never been walked on. Everything was neat and tidy and completely without soul. I felt like a dusty old relic pulling up their pristine concrete driveway in my 10-year-old Ford. Jamal opened the door, already dressed in an expensive-looking suit, his tie perfectly knotted. Behind him, I could see Tiffany in the hallway, putting on diamond earrings that glittered under the recessed lighting. She was wearing a slinky black evening dress. And right then, seeing them dressed like they were headed to a gala, with me standing on the porch holding a homemade pie, I knew. I wasn't a guest for dinner. I was a task on their to-do list, something to be checked off before their real evening began. The house was cold, and I don't mean the air conditioning. There was no welcoming warmth, no smell of meatloaf baking in the oven. The only scent in the air was the sharp chemical smell of Tiffany's perfume. It hung in every room, erasing any hint of a real home. My sweet potato pie, still warm from my oven, sat on their cold granite countertop, looking as out of place as I felt. It went completely unmentioned. They didn't lead me to the dining room. Tiffany just pointed to the kitchen island. "Here," she said, and handed me that flimsy paper plate with the cold, clumpy macaroni. My son wouldn't meet my eyes. He just kept scrolling on his phone, a little half-smile on his face from whatever he was looking at. He was in the room, but he wasn't with me. He had left me alone with her. I tried. Lord knows, I tried to build a bridge across the silence. I asked Jamal about his job managing the electronics store. "It's fine, Ma," he said, his thumb never stopping its swiping motion. One-word answers. Bricks in the wall he was building between us. I turned to Tiffany, desperate for a human connection. "That's a beautiful dress," I told her. She looked down at it, then back at me, a smirk playing on her lips. "It should be," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "It cost more than your grocery bill for a month." The silence that followed that comment was deafening. It was thick and ugly. I sat there on that hard stool, picking at the cold pasta on my paper plate, and felt myself shrinking. I wasn't a mother or a guest. I was an inconvenience, a piece of old, unwanted furniture they didn't know how to get rid of. But you know what hurt the most? It wasn't her cruelty. I expected that from her. It was my son's silence. His silence was his agreement. Every second he sat there and said nothing, he was co-signing her disrespect. He was choosing her and that big, empty house over me. I didn't finish the macaroni. I quietly stood up, picked up my pie from the counter, and walked to the door. I didn't say goodbye. There was nothing left to say. I could feel their eyes on my back, but I didn't turn around. Let them have their silence. The 45-minute drive home was a blur of tears. The headlights of oncoming cars splintered through my wet eyelashes. By the time I pulled into my own driveway, the grief had hardened into something else, something cold and protective. My house didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt safe. It wasn't just a home. It was a fortress, and I was just beginning to realize I was under siege. The weeks that followed were filled with that same heavy silence, but now it was laced with the poison of that evening. My hope for reconciliation had shriveled up. Then came the news of my grandson Michael Jr.'s high school graduation. I thought, that has to be different. A graduation is a family milestone. It's a sacred thing. It was a chance, a tiny little spark of hope to mend what was broken. I went out and bought him the new gaming console he'd been talking about for months, a big, expensive gift that stretched my budget thin. I wrapped it carefully and waited for the invitation. It never came. Days turned into a week. The date of the ceremony got closer. Finally, I swallowed my pride and called Jamal. His voice was rushed, impatient. "Oh, Ma," he said, with a sigh that made me feel like I was 100 years old. "It's just a small, boring thing in the school cafeteria. You don't need to trouble yourself. We're just going to grab a quick burger with him afterward. We didn't want to bother you with the drive." A lie. A bald-faced, lazy lie. And the worst part is, a piece of me wanted to believe it. The next afternoon, my neighbor, Miss Evelyn, stopped by on her way back from the post office. Miss Evelyn knows everything about everybody. As she likes to say, love might be blind, but the neighbors ain't. She was scrolling through her phone, and she turned the screen to me. "Look, Loretta, isn't that your Jamal?" It was a picture from the graduation. But it wasn't a small event in the cafeteria. It was a huge celebration on the school's football field, with a proper stage and hundreds of balloons. And there, in the photo, smiling from ear to ear, were Jamal and Tiffany, standing next to Tiffany's parents. They had been invited. They had a place of honor. I was the one who was a bother. The pain of that was sharp, but I didn't have much time to dwell on it. A few days later, my phone rang again. It was Jamal, and this time his voice was filled with panic. Ma, you gotta help us. That big storm last night. It tore up part of the roof. Water's coming into the attic. The roofer said he needs $3,000 up front cash to fix it today before it gets worse. "We don't have it, Ma. I don't know what to do." His panic felt real. His desperation sounded genuine. And that old foolish mother's heart of mine took over. All the hurt, all the humiliation, it all just melted away in the face of my child's fear. He needed me. My son needed his mother. I went to the bank that morning and withdrew the $3,000 from my emergency savings account. It was the money my Michael had left me, the money I was supposed to live on if I ever got truly sick. I gave it to Jamal without a second thought, because that's what a mother does. For a few days after, I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. I had been useful. I had helped my family in a crisis. The thought that I had saved them from a disaster was a comforting balm on my wounded spirit. I imagined them safe and dry in their big house, grateful for their old mama. I was a fool, a complete and utter fool. One evening, I was sitting on my porch, scrolling through my phone like the young folks do. I don't use social media much, but sometimes I like to see pictures of my friends' grandchildren. On a whim, I looked up Tiffany's Instagram page. It was public for the world to see her perfect life. And there it was, a post from 2 days ago. It was a picture of her, sitting in a brand new top-of-the-line hot tub on their back patio. She was grinning from ear to ear, holding up a glass of wine to the camera. Jamal was in the background, smiling proudly. The caption underneath read, "Our backyard paradise is complete. Thank you to the best hubby in the world for making my dreams come true." I stared at that picture until my eyes burned. The hot tub, the smiling faces, the lie. I went online and searched for the model of that hot tub. The price was listed right there on the manufacturer's website, $2,999, $3,000. There was no storm. There was no leaky roof. There was only a cold, calculated lie designed to get money out of the foolish old woman who still loved them. They didn't even try to hide it. They were so confident in my ignorance, so sure that their world and my world would never intersect, that they flaunted their deception for everyone to see. Their arrogance was staggering. The blood in my veins turned to ice water. I looked at that picture of my smiling son, and for the first time, I didn't see the little boy I raised. I saw a stranger, a con man who used his own mother's love as a weapon against her. It was in that moment, sitting alone on my dark porch, that a terrible question began to form in my mind, a question that would change everything. If they could lie so easily, so cruelly about this, what else were they hiding? As my grandson Michael Jr.'s birthday approached, that little flicker of a mother's hope, the one I thought was dead and buried, started to glow again. Maybe a child's birthday could be the truce, a neutral ground where we could be a family again, even for an afternoon. I decided to make him a quilt, a real old-fashioned patchwork quilt in the colors of his favorite football team, something made by hand, something that held love in its very threads. For 2 weeks, I sat in my rocking chair, the needle flying in and out of the fabric. Every single stitch was a prayer that this boy, my only grandchild, would feel the warmth of my love wrapped around him, a prayer that a gift from the heart could still matter more than a gift from the wallet. I was stitching together my hopes for our family piece by piece. On the day of his birthday, I drove over to their house, the quilt folded neatly in a box on the passenger seat. There were no cars in the driveway. The house was quiet. I figured they were out for a birthday lunch. I decided I'd just leave the gift on their doorstep. But when I walked up the porch steps, I saw the front door was slightly ajar. They hadn't even bothered to lock it. That's how safe they felt in their perfect little world. I pushed the door open just enough to slip inside. My plan was simple: leave the box in the entryway and go. But as I stepped onto their cold tile floor, my eyes landed on the kitchen island. A spiral notebook was lying there, left wide open. I wasn't trying to snoop, Lord knows I wasn't, but Tiffany's handwriting was big and loud just like her. The heading at the top of the page, written in angry black ink, was impossible to miss. It said, Plan for Mama J. My breath caught in my chest. Below that heading was a list, a cold-hearted inventory of my life. House appraisal came back, worth at least $500K, maybe more with the land. Jamal is still being weak, won't push for power of attorney, but we have to pressure him. Tell her it's to help with her bills. Once we get control of her accounts, the house is ours. This cash cow is our ticket to the business loan. Cash cow. The words seemed to lift off the page and hang in the air. Cash, cow. That's what I was to them. Not a mother, not a grandmother. I was livestock, an asset to be milked dry and then discarded. The silence of that big empty house pressed in on me, and in my ears, those two words echoed and echoed, drowning out the sound of my own breaking heart. Standing there in their sterile kitchen, I wasn't a mother betrayed or a grandmother scorned anymore. I was an asset that was about to be liquidated. Every cruel word, every casual dismissal, every lie from the past year suddenly clicked into place. This wasn't a string of careless hurts. It was a campaign, a deliberate, thought-out strategy to strip me of my dignity, my home, and my security. The woman who had walked into that house clutching a birthday gift died right there on that cold tile floor. The drive home was strangely calm. The tears were gone. The world outside my windshield seemed sharper, the colors more vivid. I wasn't seeing things through a fog of grief anymore. I was seeing them through a lens of ice-cold clarity. As Maya Angelou always said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I had given them a second, third, and fourth time. I was done believing in the people they pretended to be. I walked into my own home and looked around. I saw the worn spot on the arm of my husband's favorite chair. I saw the pencil marks on the door frame measuring how tall Jamal had grown each year. This wasn't just property. It wasn't just $500,000 on a piece of paper. This house was my life. It was my history. And they were not going to take it. The shock didn't turn into sobs. It hardened into a resolve so pure and so strong, it felt like steel settling in my bones. You see, I finally understood. This was not a family argument. This was a business deal where I was the target of a hostile takeover. For months, I'd been trying to solve the wrong problem. They didn't want my love. They wanted my house. And I was about to show them what happens when you try to foreclose on Loretta Johnson. I knew one thing for sure. I would not confront them. I would not give them the satisfaction of my tears or my anger. An emotional breakdown was exactly what they wanted. It would prove their point that I was old, unstable, and unable to manage my own affairs. No, my response would be quiet. It would be methodical, and it would be absolute. They thought they were dealing with a simple old woman who baked pies. They forgot who I was for 35 years before I retired. I was the senior administrator at the biggest Baptist church in the county. I managed budgets that would make their heads spin. I dealt with lawyers and contractors and grieving families and feuding deacons. I knew how paper worked. I knew how power worked. They had underestimated their opponent, and that was a fatal mistake. I didn't go to the internet. I went to the old yellow pages sitting in my hall closet. I looked under attorneys and found the name I was looking for, Mr. David Chen, a man known for being a shark in a pinstripe suit. He was tough, smart, and had no time for nonsense. He was perfect. When I called his office, the voice that came out of me wasn't the voice of a broken-hearted old woman. It was the voice of Loretta Johnson, senior church administrator, the woman who ran a tight ship for over 3 decades. "Good morning," I said, my tone crisp and clear. "I'd like to schedule a consultation with Mr. Chen regarding a comprehensive review and restructuring of my estate. My priority is long-term asset protection." The receptionist, probably used to weepy, frantic calls, was momentarily silent. "Of course, Mrs. Johnson," she said. "He has an opening next Tuesday." "I'll be there," I said, and hung up. Not 1 minute later, my phone rang. It was Jamal. He must have gotten home and seen the quilt. He must have known I was there. I looked at his name on the screen, then pressed the button to silence the call. The time for talking was over. The time for action had begun. For my meeting with Mr. Chen, I didn't wear my usual church dress. I went to the back of my closet and pulled out a navy blue business suit I hadn't worn in years. I put on sensible heels and carried a leather portfolio. I was not there to tell a sob story. I was there to conduct business. Mr. Chen was a sharp, no-nonsense man in his 60s with eyes that saw everything. He gestured for me to sit, and I didn't waste his time with pleasantries. I laid out the facts. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I presented the situation as a series of documented events, handing him a folder with my financial statements, the deed to my house, and my current will. At the very end, I slid a sealed envelope across his polished mahogany desk. "This is a copy of their business plan," I said simply. He opened it and read the single page. His expression didn't change, but a new hardness settled in his eyes. He looked up at me. "Their strategy is cruel and sloppy," he said. "Ours will be neither." He laid out the plan of defense with beautiful, brutal efficiency. First, we would create an irrevocable trust. "Think of it as a legal fortress," he explained. "You transfer ownership of your house and land into the trust. You are the trustee, so you control it completely for the rest of your life. You can live in it, paint it, do whatever you want, but legally, you no longer own it, which means no one can take it from you, no creditor can touch it, and no greedy child can claim it." "Who gets it when I'm gone?" I asked. "That's the beautiful part," he said with a thin smile. "You name the beneficiary. Anyone you want." I didn't have to think twice. "The scholarship fund for our local historically black college and university," I said. "Let my family's legacy help build a future for children who actually want to work for it." Next, to counter any future attempt they might make to declare me mentally incompetent, we took out a comprehensive long-term care insurance policy. It was expensive, but it was a masterstroke. It was documented proof that I was of sound mind, planning responsibly for my own future medical needs. I was taking care of myself. There was no need for them to step in. I was building my fortress, brick by legal brick. I was taking away every weapon they thought they had, and I was doing it in the quiet of a lawyer's office, without them even knowing that the war had already begun. The last piece of the puzzle was my will. It was the final stone to be placed in the wall of my fortress. Mr. Chen advised against cutting my son out completely. "It can give him grounds to contest it," he explained, his voice flat and practical. "He could claim you weren't in your right mind, that you were being influenced. We want to close every door, lock every window." So we got creative. In the new last will and testament of Loretta Johnson, I left my only son, Jamal Johnson, the grand sum of $5, a crisp $5 bill, to be placed in an envelope upon my passing. But that wasn't all. As Mr. Chen said, we needed to close every door. Alongside that $5, I instructed that a second sealed envelope be given to him. Inside that second envelope, there would be two things. First, a high-quality color copy of the Plan for Mama J page from Tiffany's notebook. And second, a single small note card with just 3 words written in my own hand. "This is why." It was my final word on the matter. No drama, no long, tearful letters, just cold, hard proof, a receipt for his betrayal. The following week, I sat in Mr. Chen's quiet, air-conditioned office, a place that had become my war room. The stack of documents was intimidating, full of legal language and clauses, but I wasn't intimidated. I read each one, and with every signature, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The pen felt heavy in my hand, but it wasn't the weight of sorrow. It was the weight of justice. Signature 1, the irrevocable trust. My home, my history, my sanctuary. Safe. I was protecting my past. Signature 2, the long-term care policy. My future health, my dignity, my choices secured. I was providing for my future. Signature 3, The new will, my legacy, my final statement, clarified. I was closing a painful chapter of my life. I had built my fortress and locked the gates. Now all I had to do was wait for the enemy to realize they were attacking an empty citadel. I walked out of that office building into the bright Georgia sunshine and took a deep breath. For the first time in a long, long time, the air felt clean. I was free. It took a few weeks, but the storm finally broke. And when it did, it came with the force of a hurricane. It turned out, as I suspected, that their grand business plan, some scheme to open a high-end sneaker store, was entirely dependent on a loan. And that loan was entirely dependent on using my home as collateral. The call came on a Thursday morning. It was Tiffany, and she didn't waste time with hellos. Her voice was a screech, high and thin with panic and rage. "What did you do?" she shrieked into the phone. "What did you do? We just got a call from the bank. They said the house isn't in your name. You gave our house away." Our house. You just have to marvel at the audacity. Before I could even respond, the phone was snatched away, and Jamal's voice, thick with a desperate whine, filled my ear. "Mama, what is she talking about? It's a mistake, right? That's my inheritance, Mama. That house is for Michael Jr.'s future." I held the phone a few inches from my ear, listening to his pathetic pleading. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment before I spoke, my voice as calm and steady as a clear country morning. "Jamal," I said, "I've simply put my financial affairs in order. It's the responsible thing to do at my age." They were at my house in 15 minutes. Jamal's expensive car screeched to a halt in my gravel driveway, and they stormed up to my porch like avenging angels. They didn't even knock, just burst through the front door. Their faces were masks of ugly disbelief and fury. The performance that followed was something to behold. They screamed, they accused, they tried to manipulate me with guilt. Tiffany called me a selfish, crazy old woman who was ruining their lives. Jamal tried the wounded son approach, his voice cracking as he talked about how I was destroying our family. They paced my living room, the one they had planned to sell, and desecrated it with their greed. I let them burn themselves out. I sat in my husband's old armchair, my hands folded in my lap, and I just listened. As they say, an empty wallet screams louder than a guilty heart. When their tirade finally sputtered out, leaving them panting in the middle of my rug, I slowly stood up. I walked over to the little writing desk in the corner and picked up a single folded sheet of paper I had placed there that morning. I didn't say a word. I just held it out to them. I watched the color drain from Jamal's face as he read the words. His eyes darted back and forth across the page, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Tiffany snatched the paper from his trembling hand. Her rage dissolved into a dead, white shock. The mask was gone. All that was left was the ugly, greedy truth, exposed in her own handwriting. They stood there, frozen in the silence of my living room, the evidence of their treachery held between them. "You were worried about the cash cow," I said, my voice quiet but carrying the weight of every lie and every tear. "I just wanted to assure you both, the cash cow is now fully secured." They left my house like defeated ghosts, the paper still clutched in Tiffany's hand. They didn't slam the door. They didn't have any fight left in them. I watched them go, and I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel anger. I felt nothing but a profound sense of closure. The door was closed. The account was settled. It didn't take long for the news to trickle through the town grapevine, mostly by way of Miss Evelyn. "You won't believe it, Loretta," she told me over the fence a month later. "I saw them selling that big fancy Cadillac Escalade of theirs. Jamal's driving an old Honda now, the kind with the paint peeling off the roof." A few weeks after that, she came by with another piece of news. She'd seen Tiffany, not at the fancy mall, but working a cash register at the dollar store out on the highway, her face hard and her fancy nails chipped. Their perfect lawn, she reported, was overgrown with weeds. The expensive hot tub on their back patio was covered with a cheap blue tarp, already collecting rainwater and dead leaves. Their beautiful, fake world had crumbled because its foundations were built on my love, and I had withdrawn my support. One evening, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jamal. I read it without any emotion at all. "Mama, we made mistakes. I'm sorry. Things are really hard right now. Michael Jr. asks about you all the time." It was a pathetic, last-ditch effort. A child's apology not for the betrayal, but for getting caught. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was sorry for his consequences. He didn't miss his mother. He missed her money. Without a moment's hesitation, I pressed delete. My life is quiet now, but it's a different kind of quiet. It's not the heavy, lonely silence of before. It's a peaceful quiet. It's filled with the purring of the cat I adopted from the animal shelter where I volunteer twice a week. It's filled with the laughter of my friends during our monthly card games. It's filled with the gentle hum of my own contentment as I work in my garden, my hands in the rich Georgia soil that my family has owned for generations. Soil that is mine and will remain mine until the day I die. Then it will help other children rise up. They thought they could take my house. They thought they could take my money. What they never understood is that they had already taken the most valuable thing, my love, and squandered it. They left me with nothing but my own strength. And it turns out that was more than enough. I found a peace they will never know, a peace that no one can ever take from me again. I'm grateful you spent this time with me. If you've lived through something similar or if my story spoke to you in any way, please share your feelings in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Your stories matter too. If you want more, don't forget to like and subscribe. Be gentle with yourself, and I'll see you in the next story.